Hi, Scott Thornton bringing a piece to you on God's love in the face of terrorism in response to all of the jubilation that occurred around the elimination of Osama Bin Laden. And I do get it. If I had somebody who had perished in the Twin Towers, I probably would have felt similarly. But as a person of faith, I think we have to rethink this. We get confused as people of faith because we see in the Hebrew Scriptures a God that seems to smite evil people and reward good people, and we get it in our head that somehow this is our job also. We tend to forget that Jesus brought a different picture of God into the world, a God of grace, a God of unconditional love and forgiveness. Unconditional love and forgiveness that applies to each and every person, no exception. Jesus teaches, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now you might think that it was easier because Jesus didn't have to deal with the likes of Hitler or Saddam Hussein or Osama Bin Laden. Actually, times were worse in Jesus' day. In the 1,000 years leading up to his birth, the Israelites were serially slaughtered, pillaged, placed into slavery by the Babylonians, the Syrians, the Persians, the Macedonians, and the Romans. Yet we don't see Jesus at any time, despite a violent oppression by the Romans, we don't see Jesus at any time call for the annihilation of a Roman official. In fact, in one encounter with a Roman official, a military Roman centurion, somebody who may have even acted violently to Israelites previously, what we see is Jesus approach him with love, healing his servant and commending him on his faith. We see this love of Jesus extend to other people that were felt to be incorrigible or unlovable in society. The tax collectors, Matthew and Zacchaeus. The Samaritan woman at the well, who was promiscuous. The adulteress, who society would have stoned. We see him apply this love to the people who arrested him, who nailed him to the cross. We're talking about a love here that transcends just ordinary feeling and emotion. A love that teaches, that Jesus teaches, is unconditional. It does not hold the same prejudices that we do. It is a love that cannot be earned. God's grace cannot be earned. There's nothing we can do to make God love us more. And more importantly, there's nothing we can do to make God love us less. That love is there all the time, unconditionally. All we have to do is turn to God, and it is heaped upon us in the same way that the father in the prodigal son story immediately reconciles and heaps love upon the wayward son. God's love does not hold other prejudices that we have. God's grace and love does not discriminate. It does not discriminate upon income or education, social status, color, sexual orientation, religion, ethnicity, or political affiliation. Our prejudices, we have to keep in mind, are not God's. God's love is also infinite in the number of times that it is given to us. Jesus makes this clear in his response to Peter. I don't expect us to innately understand or relate to this kind of love. A good example of this can be found in the Hebrew Scriptures in the story of Jonah, where God asks Jonah to take his message of mercy to the Ninevites. Nineveh was the capital of Assyria, a particularly wicked city and wicked people that committed heinous atrocities against the Israelites. Jonah was angry with God. He was not interested in providing a message of mercy. He was not interested in repentance and redemption for the Ninevites in the same way that we were and are generally still not looking for repentance and redemption from the leaders of Al-Qaeda. Yeah, it's incredibly hard for us to understand that God's grace extends to everyone. As humans, we love to condemn, we love to punish, those who we think are evil, but this is not the way of God. As Jesus said to Nicodemus, for God did not send his Son into the world to condemn it, but to save the world through him. We see this grace extended by Jesus to the criminal on the cross next to him. We see it extended to the very people that torture and kill him. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. Radical nature of God's love and the fact that it is boundless is hard for us to accept. When we think of people like Osama Bin Ladin, we think of them as truly evil, unrepentant, people deserving of annihilation. However, if Jesus was to approach Osama Bin Laden today, he would still do it with God's grace and with God's love. If you think otherwise, then you are underestimating the power and the ability of God's grace and love to transform evil into good. God's love either applies to everyone or no one. For each and every one of us act contrary to God's will. It's just a matter of degree. And nobody has the right to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, this person deserves God's love and this person doesn't. Now, does this mean that terrorists should remain free at large to commit atrocities? No. There has to be accountability for people's actions. There are people that should not be allowed to function in our society at large. And working behind the scenes with sophisticated intelligence, we can gradually remove terrorists and terrorism from our midst. When we do so, we should respond with relief that a terrorist can no longer commit an atrocity, can no longer kill innocent people. But we should not respond with glee, but rather with sadness that a beloved creature of God had become so lost that they committed such evil. As we encounter evil in the world, let us understand that justice is not achieved through broad, violent acts of revenge and retaliation. Our response to terrorism throughout the world should be based on reason, not fear. Our response should be dictated with a respect for a tolerance for people that are different than us and the sacredness of human life. We should always be seeking healing, not retribution. Retributive justice does not bring peace and love into the world. We have seen this form of justice with its revenge and retaliation fail in Ireland, Israel and Palestine, Rwanda, Kashmir, the Balkans, and most recently in Afghanistan and Iraq. In each of these cases, violence has increased and innocent lives destroyed. Very much, unfortunately, like the Romans in Jesus' day, America routinely pursues a path of peace through power, attempting to impose peace on the world by wielding our mighty military strength. Last year, our country alone accounted for 40% of all global arms spending. I truly understand the mentality. I still fondly remember all of my G.I. Joe paraphernalia and James Bond's secret weapons. I still get an adrenaline rush when I hear Dirty Harry say, "Make my day." There can be no doubt we have a freewheeling gunslinger cowboy mentality in this country. However, as a person of faith, I am called to follow a different path, the one taught and modeled by Jesus. And I have to be perfectly clear, Jesus never asked me to worship him. He asked me to follow him. Either I believe that Jesus' teachings reflect the will of God for the world, or I do not. And if I do, then I must at least try to pursue a path of love, compassion, forgiveness, peace, and nonviolence. That is what he taught. That is how he lived. Either God's love wins or it doesn't. In the end, Jesus says it does. We see glimpses of this through the lives of people like Martin Luther King Jr., Bishop Tutu, Nelson Mandela. Terrorism will remain in the world until the direction of the wind changes, away from militarism and towards compassion. As people of faith, let us be strong proponents for this change. Jesus tells us that ultimately our success in the world will be judged not by our power, but rather by how well we serve others, not by our might, but rather by our compassion. Thank you.